Story number 1. The last call from room 709. I never believed in ghosts, not in the way people talked about them. I had spent my entire life dismissing the supernatural as nothing more than overactive imaginations and urban legends. But what happened to me that night in room 709, what I heard on that phone, has never left me. It was a cold, stormy night in Chicago, and I had just checked into the Branford Hotel, an old but well-maintained building in the heart of downtown. The rain hammered against the windows as I rolled my suitcase down the carpeted hallway, glancing at the dim lighting that gave the place an eerie, yellowish glow. My company had booked me here for a conference, and I was exhausted from the long flight. Room 709, 7th floor, end of the hallway. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a standard hotel setup. A queen-sized bed, a wooden desk, and a large window that overlooked the city streets, where headlights blurred through the rain. The room smelled faintly of old books, mixed with that artificial lemon scent hotels use to mask whatever came before. I set my suitcase down, loosened my tie, and collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. My body ached from travel, and I just wanted to sleep. But before I could even close my eyes, the phone rang. A shrill, old-fashioned ring. Unexpected, in a place like this. I turned my head toward the bedside table where a black rotary phone sat. It hadn't been there when I walked in. I was sure of it. Every hotel I had ever stayed in used modern cordless phones. But here it was, vibrating slightly with each ring. I hesitated, then picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence. And then, "You shouldn't be here." The voice was mine. My stomach twisted into a knot. The words came through crackly and distant, as if spoken through layers of static. But I recognized it. It was me, my own voice. "Hello?" I repeated, my throat dry. The line crackled, and then I heard breathing. Shallow, ragged breathing, like someone was struggling to get words out. My own voice, again, whispering, "Leave. Now." I slammed the phone down and stood up, my pulse hammering. My breath came in sharp gasps as I backed away from the nightstand, staring at the phone as if it would move. I grabbed my phone to check the time, 11:47 p.m. Too late to request a room change, but the thought crossed my mind. Maybe it was a prank? Someone playing a sick joke? I grabbed the receiver again, listening. Nothing. Just the faint hum of dead air. I turned off the lights, got into bed, and pulled the blanket over me. The wind howled outside, and the steady drip, drip, drip of rain against the window was oddly soothing. I closed my eyes, willing myself to ignore everything that had just happened. And then the phone rang again. The same shrill, piercing ring. I sat up so fast my vision blurred. The room felt colder than before, my breath coming out in shallow puffs. I did not want to answer it, but I had to. With a shaking hand, I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" A long, rattling breath. And then the voice, my voice, spoke again, lower, strained. "You're going to die here." My stomach lurched. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I felt something shift, almost imperceptibly, as if someone had just sat down on the edge of the bed. I threw the phone down and jumped out of bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. And then, in the dim light, I saw it. A shape in the reflection of the window. A man. He was standing right behind me. I turned. Nothing. The room was empty, but the moment my eyes flicked back to the window, I saw him again. Tall, motionless, his head tilted, at an unnatural angle. I could feel him. I grabbed my suitcase, yanking it toward the door, fumbling for the lock with shaking hands. My fingers felt numb, like I had been out in the cold for hours. The phone rang. I ignored it. I yanked open the door and rushed into the hallway, my breath coming in short gasps. The corridor was silent. No guests, no sounds, just the flickering of a dim ceiling light. I didn't stop until I reached the elevator. My hands trembled as I pressed the button, my pulse hammering in my ears. The doors slid open. I stepped inside, pressing the lobby button repeatedly, as if that would make it move faster. The door slid shut, and the elevator jolted downward, and then the lights flickered. The elevator stopped. My breath hitched. I pressed the buttons frantically. Nothing. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. And then, the emergency phone inside the elevator rang. I turned, dread curling around my stomach. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to hear it. But my body moved on its own. I lifted the receiver, my hands clammy. And then, my voice. Weak. Strained. "You're too late." The light snapped off. Darkness swallowed everything. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hotel lobby, a security guard shaking my shoulder. I was lying on one of the couches, drenched in sweat, my suitcase beside me. "Sir, are you okay?" the guard asked. I shot up, looking around. The lobby was normal, bright, clean. The front desk clerk gave me a concerned look. "You passed out near the elevators," the guard explained. "Are you feeling all right?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. What time is it?" The clerk checked the clock. "Just after midnight." "Why?" My blood ran cold. I had just left my room at 11:50 p.m. There was no way all of this had happened in under 10 minutes. The security guard helped me up, his grip firm. "You sure you're okay? You looked pretty out of it when we found you." I turned toward the mighty front desk. "I need to check out." The clerk hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. What room were you in?" 709. The clerk's face paled. His hands froze over the keyboard. "Sir, we don't have a room 709. I stared at him. "That floor doesn't have any guests," he continued, his voice careful. "In fact, the 7th floor has been closed for years." I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I just took my suitcase and left. To this day, I don't know what happened in that room or how I even got to the lobby. But I do know one thing. I will never, ever stay in Brantford Hotel again. Story number 2. The girl who knocked at 3 a.m. The first time I heard the knock, I thought I was dreaming. It was a soft, hesitant tap, tap, tap at the front door, barely audible over the heavy rain beating against the windows. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 3 a.m. The house was silent except for the steady hum of the ceiling fan. My daughter Lily was asleep in the next room, and as far as I knew, no one had any reason to be knocking at our door at this hour. I sat up, blinking away the sleep, and listened. Tap, tap, tap. A slow chill crept up my spine. I live in New Orleans, in an old shotgun-style house just outside the quarter. The kind of place where you hear every creak, every shift in the foundation, every whisper of wind slipping through the walls. At this hour, no one should be outside, not in this storm, not in this neighborhood. Still, I got out of bed, careful not to make too much noise. I didn't want to wake Lily. As I stepped into the hallway, the floorboards groaned under my weight. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks were rhythmic, software, almost polite. I hesitated, standing a few feet from the door. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but rain, cascading down the porch in thick sheets. No shadow, no movement, just the storm. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the wind had knocked something against the house. I turned to go back to bed when tap, tap, tap. This time, I froze. The knocks had come from lower on the door, not at normal height, where an adult would knock. A child. A shiver ran through me. I swallowed hard, pressing my eye to the peephole again. This time she was there. A little girl stood just beyond the threshold, soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered against her pale face. She wore a thin, white nightgown, clinging to her small frame. She wasn't shivering, wasn't hugging herself for warmth. She just stood there. I couldn't see her eyes. The porch light was dim, and the rain distorted my vision, but something about her felt wrong. I hesitated. Opened the door, called the police. I leaned in, my breath fogging the peephole. Her lips parted. Even through the heavy rain, I heard her. "Please, let me in." Her voice was hollow, flat. No urgency, no fear, just a quiet request. I gripped the doorknob, my instincts screaming at me to not open the door. Every horror story I'd ever heard, every urban legend came rushing into my mind, but this was just a child, a lost child in the middle of a storm. "Are you okay?" I called through the door. She didn't react, didn't move. "Where are your parents?" Nothing. Then, after a long pause, she tilted her head ever so slightly to one side. "Please, let me in." The exact same words, the exact same tone, like a recording. I backed away, my fingers slipping from the doorknob. Every nerve in my body told me something was very, very wrong. I reached for my phone on the table by the couch and dialed 911. As soon as I pressed call, the knocks stopped. Silence. I turned back to the door. She was gone. My heart pounded. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard her move. Just gone. A faint static filled my ears. At first, I thought it was my phone, but then I realized it was coming from the baby monitor in Lily's room. I hadn't turned it on. I sprinted down the hall, threw open her door. She was still in bed, her small body rising and falling with soft, steady breaths. But the baby monitor on her dresser crackled with whispers, low, indecipherable. Not her voice. I snatched the monitor and shut it off, my hands shaking. My mouth was dry. The storm outside had grown louder, as if the wind was trying to push into the house. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, every light on, staring at the door, waiting. But the knocks never came again. By morning, the storm had passed, and for a moment, I let myself believe I had imagined it all. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, whatever. Then I found the footprints, small, wet footprints on my front porch leading away from the door. They stopped abruptly in the middle of my yard as if the child had just vanished. For the next few nights, nothing happened. No knocks, no whispers, but I felt watched. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like something was standing just beyond my vision. Then, on the fourth night, Lily woke up screaming. I ran into her room, heart in my throat, and found her sobbing, shaking in her bed. "Baby, what's wrong?" I wrapped her in my arms, rocking her. She buried her face in my chest, her little fingers clutching my shirt. "She was in my room," she sobbed. The wet girl. My blood ran cold. I didn't ask how she knew. I didn't want to know. I called my sister, told her we needed to stay at her place for a while. That same morning, I packed a bag and left the house, Lily in my arms. That was 2 years ago. I never went back. I sold the house, moved to a different part of the city. But sometimes, when it rains at night, I wake up at exactly 3 a.m. And I swear, I can still hear the soft tap, tap, tap against the door. Story number 3. Don't look in the mirror when it rains. The first time it happened, I thought I was just tired. I had been up late, working on an article, the kind of writing that blurs into nonsense after staring at the screen too long. The rain had started around midnight, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the windows of my apartment in Seattle. I had just washed my face, rubbing my tired eyes, when I glanced up at the bathroom mirror, and my reflection blinked. A second after I did, I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I leaned closer, studying my own face, my damp hair clinging to my forehead. Everything looked normal. Maybe my eyes were just tired. Maybe it was a trick of the dim bathroom light. I shook my head and went to bed, telling myself I was being ridiculous. The second time, I wasn't tired. It was another rainy night, a week later. I had just finished brushing my teeth when I caught it again, a slight delay. It was so subtle, I almost missed it. My reflection blinked too late, like it was trying to mimic me but got the timing wrong. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting. The lights flickered for a second and my own eyes in the mirror seemed off, darker, slightly too wide. I reached up, pressing a hand against my chest just to feel something real. My reflection did the same, perfectly synchronized, but something about the way it did felt unnatural, too precise. Then, without me moving, my reflection smiled. I stumbled back, heart pounding, slamming the bathroom door shut. I didn't sleep that night. By the third time, I knew something was wrong. The rain had been falling nonstop for hours, a relentless, steady downpour. I had been avoiding my bathroom mirror altogether, brushing my teeth quickly, without looking up, turning off the light before I could catch my reflection. But that night, as I passed the hallway mirror on my way to bed, I saw something that stopped me cold. My reflection was still standing there. I had already walked past, but in the mirror, I was still facing forward, staring at me. A bolt of ice shot through my spine. Slowly, I turned my head back toward the mirror. My reflection should have been doing the same. It wasn't. It was grinning at me, not a normal grin, not one I had ever made in my life. It was too wide, stretching too far. The corners of my mouth pulled unnaturally toward my ears. My eyes in the mirror weren't mine. They were hollow, like something else was staring at me through them. I backed away, my breath coming fast. The air in my apartment felt heavy, suffocating. Then my reflection whispered, "I see you." I didn't stay in my apartment that night. I grabbed my keys and left, rain soaking through my jacket as I got in my car and drove. I didn't have a destination, just a way. I ended up at my friend Sarah's place, showing up at her door, drenched and shaking. She didn't ask questions, just let me in, handed me a towel, and made me tea. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, watching me over the rim of her mug. I hesitated, then told her. The mirror, the blinking, the reflection that wasn't mine. To my relief, she didn't laugh. She just listened, her face growing serious. After a moment, she said, "You know, there's an old story about that." I leaned forward, gripping my mug. She hesitated before continuing. "My grandmother used to say that mirrors aren't just reflections. They're thin places. And when it rains, the veil between worlds is weaker. Things can look back at you. Sometimes they want to switch places. A chill ran through me. That's ridiculous, I said, trying to laugh. Sarah didn't smile. I slept on her couch that night, the sound of rain against the windows, lulling me into an uneasy sleep. When I woke up, I had the worst feeling, like something was watching me. Sarah's apartment had a mirror in the hallway, just outside the living room. I forced myself not to look at it as I gathered my things. I thanked her, made up an excuse about work, and left. I didn't go home, not yet. I drove aimlessly, trying to shake the unease coiling in my gut. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My heart stopped. I wasn't smiling, but my reflection was. I swerved to the side of the road, my breathing ragged, my hands were shaking. Then slowly my reflection's smile faded. It tilted its head, not like me, like a curious animal studying something weak. Then it mouthed something, a single word. Tonight. I slammed the visor down, blocking the mirror. I couldn't go home. I couldn't be anywhere with a mirror. But the city was full of them. Storefronts, car windows, even puddles on the street. Everywhere I turned, I caught glimpses of myself, or what looked like me, watching, waiting. By the time night fell, I had made a decision. I drove home, heart pounding, and entered my apartment. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, heavy, charged. The rain was hammering the windows, and the apartment was filled with a deep, eerie silence. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the bathroom and faced the mirror. My reflection was already grinning. It raised a hand before I did. I should have run. I should have screamed. But I was done being afraid. "You want in?" I whispered. My voice didn't shake this time. The reflection's smile twitched. And for the first time, I saw something else in its eyes. Surprise. I lunged. With every ounce of strength, I punched the mirror. Glass shattered, shards cutting into my knuckles, splintering across the sink. The air in the room shifted, a sharp, electric crack that sent every hair on my body standing on end. And then the lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I stumbled back, my hands bleeding, heart pounding so hard I thought it would stop. Then, whispers, low, angry, coming from inside the broken mirror. I backed away, not daring to breathe. Then, the whispering stopped. And, just like that, the air was normal again. Lighter. The weight pressing down on me was gone. I turned on the light. The shattered mirror reflected nothing but broken glass. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't broken it. I don't want to know. But I do know one thing. I never look in mirrors when it rains anymore. And if you're smart, you won't either. Story number 4. The funeral that never ends. I was halfway through Texas when the storm hit. The kind of storm that makes the sky look bruised. The kind that turns the highway into an endless stretch of blurred taillights and reflections. My rig rattled as the wind howled. Rain hammering against the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. I had been on the road for 15 hours straight, running on caffeine and stubbornness, hauling a load toward El Paso. The weather report hadn't mentioned anything this bad. The highway was nearly empty, except for a few scattered cars with their hazard lights blinking in the distance. I could barely make out a green road sign through the rain. Detour. Flooded roads. Ahead. My GPS agreed, rerouting me onto an unfamiliar road cutting through the backwoods. It looked like one of those forgotten highways. 2 lanes, no street lights, just endless stretches of farmland and trees. The storm followed me. The farther I drove, the heavier the rain got. The windshield wipers struggled against the downpour, and I had to slow down to a crawl just to stay on the road. Then I saw them, a procession of headlights, lined up in the distance. At first I thought it was traffic from the detour, maybe other drivers trying to escape the storm. But as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. A funeral procession. Dozens of cars, all crawling at the same slow, deliberate speed. Their headlights were on, but they cast an eerie, muted glow through the rain. The lead car was an old-fashioned hearse, the kind you don't see anymore, black and elongated, like something out of a different century. I slowed down behind the last car in line. It was an old Buick, its windows fogged up. No one was honking. No one was in a rush to get past. The entire procession moved as one, like they had nowhere else to be. I figured it was just bad timing. A small-town funeral caught in the storm, trying to make its way to the cemetery. But the longer I followed, the more I started to feel off. Something wasn't right. The procession wasn't ending. It stretched on for miles. I kept driving, passing car after car, but there was no break in the line. Every vehicle was ancient, like they had been pulled from different decades, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Some looked like they had been sitting in junkyards for years, rust creeping up their doors, tires balding. And then I noticed something else. I couldn't see inside them. The windows were dark, completely opaque, like the glass wasn't just tinted but painted black from the inside. No silhouettes, no movement, nothing. I gripped the wheel tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. My truck felt too big, too loud among them. The procession just kept going, never braking, never speeding up, never slowing down. Then I made the mistake of honking. A quick tap of the horn, meant as a simple "hey, let me through." The reaction was immediate. Every single headlight in the procession flickered at the exact same time, not like a power surge, not like faulty wiring, like they had all blinked. My stomach turned to ice. The hearse ahead took a slow, deliberate turn onto a narrow dirt road, leading into the woods. Without thinking, I followed. I shouldn't have. The trees swallowed us, branches clawing at my rig as the storm raged overhead. The funeral cars weaved through the woods like they had driven this path 1,000 times before. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, the road ahead seeming to stretch longer and longer. Then I noticed the gravestones, rows and rows of them, rising from the mud like jagged teeth. A cemetery. But there were too many graves. The headstones blurred together in the rain, stretching out as far as I could see. Some were freshly dug, others so old that the names had worn away. The funeral procession wound through them, heading toward a small hill where a single, massive oak tree stood, and beneath that tree there was an open grave. I should have turned around. I should have gunned it and gotten the hell out of there. But my body wouldn't move. My hands were locked on the wheel, my breath shallow. The hearse came to a stop. The doors of every car in the procession swung open at the same time. But no one stepped out. The doors just hung there, yawning black, rain pouring into the empty vehicles. The air felt heavier, pressing against my chest. I knew that if I looked into those cars, I would see something I wasn't supposed to. Then the wind shifted. The smell hit me like a fist to the gut. Rot, decay, earth that had been turned and turned again, never given time to settle. And then I heard it, a sound I will never, ever forget. Scraping, not from the cars, from the graves, the soil shifting. The sound of something heavy moving beneath it. I slammed the truck into reverse, my tires skidding in the mud. The procession didn't react. The doors stayed open, waiting. Then, just as my truck lurched backward, I saw movement at the open grave. Something was climbing out. I didn't wait to see what it was. I tore out of there, my tires spitting mud, branches whipping against my windows as I barreled back onto the highway. The procession didn't follow. When I finally made it back to the main road, the rain had lightened, the world returning to something familiar. But I didn't stop driving. I didn't stop until the sun rose. By the time I reached a gas station on the outskirts of a town I didn't recognize, my hands were still shaking. I got out of the truck, breathing in the scent of wet asphalt, the normalcy of a world untouched by whatever the hell I had just seen. An old man at the gas station must have noticed my state because he wandered over, wiping his hands on a rag. "You all right, son?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just took a bad detour." He chuckled. "Yeah, the back roads out here are tricky. Where'd you end up?" I swallowed. "Some cemetery, I think, out near the woods. It was a funeral, I think. A procession." The man's face changed. His smile faded. He was quiet for a long time before he spoke. "There ain't no cemetery out there." I stared at him. "Not anymore," he added, his voice lower. "It washed away in a flood 30 years ago." I didn't say anything. I just got back in my truck and drove. I don't take detours anymore. And when I see a funeral procession on the road, I don't follow. Not ever again. Story number 5. The basement. Below the basement. I grew up in an old apartment building in Boston. The kind of place that had history. Not the kind they put on plaques, but the kind you feel in your bones. The floors creaked, the pipes groaned, and sometimes, in the middle of the night, you could hear faint knocks coming from inside the walls. My mother used to tell me stories to keep me from going into the basement. "It's old," she'd say. "The stairs are weak. You could fall." But she never told me what was really down there. The first time I went into the basement, I was 10. I had lost my basketball, and I was convinced it had rolled down the stairs. The basement was a single, dimly lit room with rows of old storage units made from rotting wooden slats. The air was damp, filled with the smell of mold and dust. I found my basketball near the boiler, but just as I was about to leave, I noticed something off. A door. It was in the far corner, partially hidden behind an old metal shelf. A thick, rusted door with a handle that looked like it hadn't been turned in years. I hesitated. I had been in the basement plenty of times before, but I had never seen this door. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over and grabbed the handle, expecting it to be stuck. But to my surprise, it turned easily, like it had been waiting for someone to open it. The door groaned as it swung inward, revealing a staircase leading down. I stepped back, my stomach twisting. How could there be another basement? Our building only had one level underground. At least that's what I had always thought. The stairs disappeared into darkness. A heavy, damp smell drifted up like the air had been trapped down there for decades. I stood there for what felt like forever, debating whether I should go down. Then I heard something move. It was faint, like shuffling footsteps on concrete. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, slamming the door behind me. My mom asked why I looked so pale, but I just shook my head. "Nothing," I mumbled. I don't like the basement." I didn't go back. Not for years. It wasn't until I was 18 and home alone one stormy night that I thought about that door again. My mom was visiting my aunt, and I was supposed to be studying. But instead, I found myself standing at the basement door, flashlight in hand. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had probably imagined that second basement, or maybe it was just a maintenance tunnel. Either way, I needed to know. I went down the stairs slowly, the old wooden steps creaking under my weight. The basement looked the same, dusty, damp, filled with forgotten things. Then I saw the door. It was still there. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for it to be gone, like I dreamed it all up. But there it was, waiting. I hesitated, my heart pounding. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened easily. The staircase beyond was even darker than I remembered. The air smelled heavier, wrong, like dirt and mildew. I clicked on my flashlight and pointed it down. The stairs went further than I thought, a lot further. I took the first step, then another. The further I went, and the colder it got. The air was thick, damp, pressing against my skin. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a hallway. Not an unfinished basement, not some old maintenance room. A hallway, lined with doors on either side. My stomach churned. Who builds rooms under an apartment building? I stepped forward, my flashlight beam bouncing off the damp concrete walls. The doors were old, wooden, and each one had a small rusted number plate. All the way up to 12. I reached for the nearest doorknob. My fingers barely brushed it when a sound, a long, slow creak like a door opening further down the hall. I turned my flashlight toward the noise. One of the doors had swung open. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how deep underground I was. The air felt thick, like something unseen was pressing against me. Then I heard footsteps, software, shuffling, moving toward me. My flashlight flickered. My hands were ice cold, slick with sweat. I forced my legs to move, stepping backward up the stairs, trying not to breathe too loud. And then, a whisper. "You're not supposed to be here." My body locked up. The voice was low, gravelly, too close. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just sprinted up the stairs, 2 at a time, shoving through the door and slamming it shut behind me. I stood there, gasping, pressing my weight against it. Nothing. No footsteps, no whispers, no sound at all. I bolted up to my apartment and locked every door. I never told my mom. I never told anyone. The next morning, I went back down to the basement, just to make sure. The door was gone. Not boarded up. Not locked. Gone. Like it had never been there at all. For weeks, I told myself I had imagined it. But sometimes, late at night, when the storm raged outside, I swore I could hear it. A faint creaking noise, like a door slowly swinging open, deep beneath the floor. I moved out a year later. I never went back. And I never ever go near basements when it rains. Story number 6. The Stalker in the Raincoat. It started on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was leaving campus late after my night class. The streets of New York slick with rain, reflecting neon lights and the occasional glow of a distant taxi. My umbrella was useless against the wind, and I cursed myself for not wearing something warmer. That's when I saw him. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just a man in a yellow raincoat, standing across the street, half hidden beneath the awning of a closed bodega. His hood was up, shielding his face, but something about the way he stood too still, staring directly at me, sent a ripple of unease through my stomach. I shook it off and kept walking. This was New York. People stared all the time. But then I saw him again, 2 blocks later, standing at the corner beneath a flickering streetlight. Same yellow raincoat, same unmoving stance, just far enough away that I couldn't see his face. I felt my pulse quicken. It was too much of a coincidence. I turned a corner sharply, half expecting him to do the same. But when I glanced back, he was already there. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard him move. But there he was, standing at the next intersection, closer this time. A slow, crawling fear crept into my spine. I ducked into a coffee shop that was still open, pressing my back against the wall, my breath coming out in shallow gasps. I waited, pretending to scroll through my phone, watching the rain lash against the windows. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When I finally looked outside, the man in the yellow raincoat was gone. I exhaled shakily and convinced myself I had been paranoid. Maybe he was just a random guy taking the same route home. Maybe I had freaked out over nothing. But the next night, it happened again. I was walking home late, rain tapping against the pavement when I saw him, standing across the street in the exact same spot as before. This time, I didn't hesitate. I ran. My boots splashed through puddles as I darted through the streets, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment building, shoving my key into the lock with trembling fingers. I slammed the door behind me, chest heaving. For a long time, I just stood there in the lobby, waiting, listening. But when I peeked outside, there was no one there. I barely slept that night. By the third night, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. I left my night class early, took a different route home, weaving through side streets and doubling back just to see if I was imagining things. But when I finally reached my block, my stomach dropped. The man in the yellow raincoat was standing right in front of my apartment building. This time, he was closer than ever. I couldn't move. My skin felt too tight. My breath caught in my throat. He stood perfectly still beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, the rain dripping from his hood. Then slowly, he lifted his head, and I saw his face. It was me. I stumbled back, choking on my own breath. My own eyes stared back at me, empty and expressionless. The hood barely shadowed the details of my own face, my own features, but wrong. The skin was pale, waterlogged, like something that had been left in the rain for too long. I turned and ran, sprinting down the block without looking back. My keys were already in my hand, my heart hammering as I shoved into my apartment building, slamming the door behind me. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal, gasping. Then a drip echoed behind me, a slow, deliberate drip. I turned, and there, standing at the far end of the hallway, was the man in the yellow raincoat. He was inside. The air in the hallway felt thick, suffocating. My apartment door was just a few feet away, but my limbs felt like they were made of lead. Then he moved. Not walked, not ran. Moved, like the space between us had folded in on itself. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the lock. I heard another drip, closer this time. Then a whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." I shoved my door open and slammed it behind me. The apartment was silent. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. Slowly, I exhaled. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, clutching my phone, waiting for morning. By the time the sun rose, I had convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination, sleep deprivation, stress, something. But when I went to grab my coat from the hook, Near the door, my stomach turned. It was soaking wet, the kind of wet that comes from standing in the rain for hours. I haven't seen the man in the yellow raincoat since that night. But sometimes, when it rains, I catch glimpses of something in puddles, in dark windows, a reflection that lingers a second too long, waiting. Story number 7, Static in the Storm. The radio station always felt different when it rained. Maybe it was the old equipment, the way the static crackled louder during storms, or the way the lights flickered when the thunder rolled overhead. I had been working as a late-night DJ for almost 2 years, covering the graveyard shift for a small-town station in Kansas. It was mostly easy work, playing music, taking the occasional call, filling the silence of the empty hours. But something about rainy nights always made the air feel heavier. That night, the storm was worse than usual. Sheets of rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees outside. The station sat on the edge of town, surrounded by empty fields and distant blinking towers. On nights like this, it felt completely cut off from the world. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee as the current song faded out. I flicked on my mic. This is KTRX Midnight Radio, keeping you company through the storm. If you're out there listening, stay dry, stay warm, and a burst of static cut me off. I frowned, tapping the control panel. The sound wasn't the usual kind of interference. It was thicker layered, like something was beneath it. Then through the static, I heard something that made my skin crawl. A voice. At first it was faint, buried beneath the white noise, then clearer. A whisper crackling through the speakers. "Help me." I sat up, my fingers tightening around the mic. If someone's out there, you're breaking up. Try calling the station directly," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Another burst of static. Then he's coming. The station went silent. The power hadn't gone out. The lights were still on. The machines were still running, but every single dial was frozen. The monitors showed nothing but dead air. I checked the phone lines. Nothing. No missed calls. No signal disruptions. Just silence. I forced a chuckle. All right, folks. Looks like we've got some weird interference tonight. Let's get back to the music. I reached for the controls. The moment my fingers touched the switch, a low, humming static filled the room. Not from the speakers, from behind me. The kind of static that moves, the kind that breathes. I turned slowly. The hallway outside the booth was dark. The emergency lights cast a dull red glow, but beyond that, everything was pitch black, the kind of darkness that felt alive. I swallowed hard. "Hello?" the static whispered. I grabbed my flashlight from the desk and stepped into the hall. The beam cut through the darkness, but it felt weak, like the shadows were swallowing the light. The station was small, just a few rooms, a break area, storage, but the hallway felt longer than usual. I walked forward, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. The static grew louder. Then I saw it. The studio door at the end of the hall, wide open. That door had been locked. I was alone. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. The room beyond was pitch black, but I could feel it. Something was in there. I raised my flashlight. A figure stood just inside the doorway, tall, motionless, the shape barely visible against the dark. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat locked up. The static swarmed my ears, rising into a deep, warbling hum. My vision blurred for a second, and then the figure moved, not stepped, not turned, just shifted, like an image on a broken TV screen. jumping from one position to another. My breath hitched. It was closer. I took a step back, my legs stiff with terror. My flashlight flickered. The static rose into a distorted scream, and then the light snapped back on. The radio blared to life. The monitors flickered. The static vanished. The studio door was closed. I was standing in an empty hallway. I stumbled back into the booth, locking the door behind me, my hands shaking. My coffee was still steaming on the desk. The clock read 3:07 a.m. I sat there for the rest of the night, watching the hallway through the window, waiting for something to move again. Nothing did. By sunrise, the storm had passed. I never told my boss what happened. Never told anyone. But I started leaving the station before midnight, letting someone else take the late shift. And on stormy nights, I don't turn on the radio, because sometimes, when the signal fades, I still hear it. A voice beneath the static, whispering, "He's coming." Story number 8. My twin brother was never born. I was 10 years old when I first heard about him. It was late at night, and I had woken up to the sound of my grandmother talking in the kitchen. She lived with us back then, a tiny old woman who smelled like lavender and always had a rosary wrapped around her fingers. She was speaking softly to my mother, her voice barely above a whisper. "He should have been here," she said. "They were supposed to be two." I stood in the hallway, frozen. They were talking about me. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My twin, my never-born twin. The next morning I asked my mother about it. She paled, gripping the coffee mug in both hands. "It was a long time ago," she said. "You weren't supposed to hear that." I pressed. She sighed, setting the mug down. "You were supposed to have a twin brother," she admitted. "But he didn't make it. He passed before you were born." "Then why did Grandma say he should have been here?" My mother's expression darkened. She shook her head. "Don't listen to her stories." But that night, when I asked my grandmother, she didn't dismiss it. She placed a hand on my cheek, her fingers cold. "He was here," she murmured, for a moment, but something took him back. I didn't understand what she meant. I didn't ask. I should have. Years passed. I grew up, went to school, got into fights, learned to ride a bike. But something always felt off. I had the strangest feeling that I wasn't alone, not in the way kids feel when they're scared of the dark. This was different. I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel someone breathing beside me. I would sit in class and hear a second set of footsteps behind mine, only to turn and see no one there. Once when I was 13, I came home from school and tossed my backpack onto my bed. It bounced off the mattress and landed on the floor, on its own. It didn't fall. It was shoved. I froze. The air in my room felt wrong, heavier than before. I had the sickening thought that if I turned around, I would see someone standing behind me. I didn't turn. I left the room and didn't go back in until my mother came home. I started having dreams after that, vivid, unsettling dreams. In them, I was never alone. There was always someone else, a shadow just out of sight, moving the way I moved, laughing when I laughed. But I never saw his face. The worst part was the mirror. In one dream, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth. The lights flickered. The air turned icy. I looked up, and for a split second, my reflection wasn't alone. There was someone standing beside me, my own height, my own build, but his eyes, they weren't mine. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. but the feeling lingered. That awareness, like something had been watching me, waiting. The next morning, I checked the mirror. Nothing was there, but the toothpaste cap was missing. I never found it. When I was 16, I finally asked my grandmother what she had meant all those years ago. "What do you mean he was here?" I demanded. "He died before he was born, right?" She held my gaze for a long moment, then she sighed. "Some spirits don't leave," she said softly. "Some stay behind, looking for a way back." That night I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. I had dreamed of him again. This time I saw his face. He was me. But his skin was pale, almost translucent. His eyes were darker, hollow, and when he smiled, it was wrong, too wide, too sharp. In the dream, I sat on the edge of my bed, and he sat beside me. "I should have been here," he whispered. "I was meant to be here." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were ice cold. "I want to come back," he murmured. I woke up screaming. My mother came rushing in, flicking on the lights. "What happened?" she asked, her face full of concern. I couldn't answer. My entire body was frozen with fear. She sat on the bed beside me, rubbing my back. "You used to do this as a baby," she murmured. "Wake up crying in the middle of the night like you were scared of something." I swallowed hard. "What if I wasn't alone?" I whispered. She didn't answer. The next morning I noticed something chilling. The pillow on the other side of the bed, the one no one used, was indented, like someone had been sleeping there. I didn't sleep in my room for weeks after that. As I got older, the dreams faded, but the feeling never left. Even now, as an adult, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and feel that presence, that awareness. I live alone, but sometimes when I walk past the mirror, I swear, for just a second, I see two reflections. Story number 9, the drowning room. The storm outside had been raging for hours, the kind of downpour that turned Miami streets into rivers and sent palm trees bending under the force of the wind. I had just moved into my new apartment a week ago, a high-rise overlooking the bay, a place I could barely afford but justified as a fresh start. New job, new city, new life. I was alone that night, curled up on the couch, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. The electricity flickered every now and then, the thunder rolling through the sky in deep, vibrating growls. I liked storms, always had. Something about them made the world feel smaller, quieter, at least until I heard the dripping. At first I thought it was the rain, but it was too steady, too precise, like a slow, deliberate leak. I sighed, assuming it was coming from the bathroom. The building was old, and I figured the plumbing wasn't perfect. I got up, stretching my stiff muscles, and padded across the wooden floor. The hallway light buzzed overhead as I stepped into the bathroom, flicking on the switch. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes and tangled hair. Everything looked normal except for the sound. Drip, drip, drip. It was louder now, but there was no sign of water. The sink was dry, the bathtub empty. I turned to leave, and my feet splashed into something cold. I froze. The floor was wet. Not damp, not a puddle, flooded. I looked down, my breath catching in my throat. The water was rising, slow, inch by inch, covering my ankles, then creeping up my calves. My brain scrambled for an explanation. A pipe burst? A leak? But the walls were dry. There was no dripping from the ceiling. The water was just appearing. I turned to rush out. But the moment my foot left the ground, it sank, like stepping into quicksand. The floor was gone beneath the water. Panic surged through me as I struggled to pull my foot up, but the water clung to me, thick and heavy. I stumbled, my hands slapping against the walls as the cold swallowed my thighs. This isn't happening. I lunged toward the door, but it wasn't there. My heart stopped. The door was gone, replaced by smooth, unbroken wall. The bathroom wasn't a bathroom anymore. The mirror was gone. The sink, the toilet, the shower, all gone. The walls stretched higher, curving at impossible angles, the corners dissolving into endless dark. The water was up to my waist now, pulling at me, filling the space too fast. I screamed, slamming my fists against the walls. It felt soft, like waterlogged wood, sinking inward with each hit. The water rose to my chest, then to my chin. I tilted my head back, gasping for breath, my throat burning with terror. I kicked my legs, but the water wasn't just water. It was heavy, thick, pulling me down. I was drowning, and then I felt it. Something brushed against my ankle. Not debris, a hand. I screamed, thrashing, but the water pulled me under. Everything went black. I woke up on the floor, coughing violently, choking on nothing. The bathroom was normal again. The door was back. The mirror, the sink, everything in its place. But the floor was bone dry. I crawled out, my limbs weak, my lungs aching. The apartment was silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination from stress. But deep down I knew. That room had tried to drown me. I moved out 3 days later. And I never take long showers anymore, just in case. Story number 10. Don't answer the door at this address. I moved into the house on Willow Street a week ago. It was an old rental, cheap for its size, and the landlord seemed oddly eager to hand over the keys. I didn't mind. I needed a place fast, and the house, despite its creaky floors and outdated fixtures, had a certain charm. The first time I noticed something strange was the night after I moved in. A letter was slipped under my door while I was in the shower. There was no name, no return address, just a single sentence written in shaky, uneven handwriting. No matter what, do not answer the door at this address. I laughed at first, assuming it was some kind of prank, maybe a previous tenant messing with me. I tossed the letter in the trash and went about unpacking. But that night, as the rain pattered against the windows, I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock at the front door. 3 taps, then silence. I sat up in bed, my stomach twisting. It was nearly 3 a.m. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? I reached for my phone but hesitated. The words from the letter echoed in my mind. Don't answer the door. I waited, barely breathing. Minutes passed, nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been the wind, or maybe some drunk, mistaking my house for another. Then it happened again the next night. Same time, same soft, patient knocks. I crept to the window, careful not to make a sound, and peeked outside. The porch light flickered weakly, illuminating the empty street. No cars, no footsteps in the wet pavement, but there was someone standing at my door. I couldn't see their face. The hood of their coat was pulled low, their hands hanging limp at their sides. They stood perfectly still, their body angled toward the door, like they were waiting. Then they tilted their head, as if they knew I was watching. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. My mind screamed at me to call the police, but something deep inside me told me not to. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I checked with my neighbors. The woman next door, an elderly lady named Miss Hensley, gave me a strange look when I asked about the knocking. "You shouldn't have moved in," she muttered, wringing her hands. "Why?" I pressed. She hesitated, then whispered, "People don't stay in that house for long. And the ones who do?" She trailed off, shaking her head. That night I barricaded the door, dragged the couch against it, kept a kitchen knife on my nightstand. The rain came again, heavier this time, drumming against the roof. And right on time, 3 a.m., the knocks returned. 3 soft, deliberate taps. Then a whisper. "Let me in." My blood turned to ice. The voice was wrong, too quiet, too close, as if the speaker's lips were pressed against the wood. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. Then the doorknob turned, slowly, deliberately, testing the lock. I couldn't move. My body felt paralyzed, my fingers digging into the sheets. The whisper came again. "I know you're awake." I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. The knocking stopped. The air in the house felt heavier, charged with something unseen. The silence stretched on. And then a sound from inside the house. Not from the door. From the hallway. A single wet footstep. I bolted upright, my pulse hammering. The hallway light flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. I wasn't alone. I grabbed the knife, inching toward my bedroom door. My breath was ragged, my skin cold with sweat. Then I saw it. A wet footprint just outside my bedroom, not a shoe print. Bare feet. I choked on my breath, my vision blurring. My hands trembled as I gripped the doorknob, ready to run. Then a whisper, right behind the door. "You shouldn't have answered." I never opened the door. I don't know how I got the courage, but I threw the door open, knife raised, and the house was empty. The front door was still locked. The barricade was untouched. But the floor by my bed was wet, like someone had been standing there, dripping. I moved out the next day. I don't know what would have happened if I had opened that door, and I don't want to know. Story number 11. The whispers under the floorboards. I bought the house because it was cheap. That should have been my first warning. A big old place just outside Denver, sitting on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, practically given away. The realtor seemed eager to close the deal, brushing off my questions about why the last owner left so suddenly. I didn't press. I needed a fresh start for me and my son Ethan, and the house, drafty, creaky, and full of history, felt like a good place to rebuild. The first time I heard the whispers, I was alone in the living room. Ethan was asleep upstairs, the wind outside rattling the windows. I was going through some old books left behind in the study when I heard it, a faint, low murmuring. I froze. The TV was off. My phone was on the table. The house should have been silent, but there it was. I followed the sound, my pulse quickening until I realized it was coming from beneath the floorboards. It wasn't the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling. It was voices, faint, whispering. I crouched down, pressing my ear to the wooden floor. The sound was clearer now. They were saying my name. I shot up, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My skin crawled, my mouth dry. I told myself it was my imagination, the wind, the house playing tricks on me. Then Ethan started waking up crying. Every night, like clockwork. 2:47 a.m. I would rush into his room, his little body shaking under the blankets. His big teary eyes would lock onto mine. and every time he would say the same thing. They don't like when we walk here. I tried to stay calm. Who, baby? His small hands gripped the sheets. The people under the floor. I stopped sleeping after that. During the day, the house felt normal. Sunlight spilled through the windows, the wooden floors warm under my feet. But at night, when the house breathed in the silence, the feeling changed. The whispers came back. Software, urgent, begging. They weren't just saying my name anymore, they were warning me. Get out before he wakes up. I started avoiding the living room, staying upstairs where the sound was muffled. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress was getting to me. But then Ethan changed. He stopped sleeping in his bed, choosing instead to sit on the floor, staring at the wooden planks. When I asked him why, his voice was quiet. They don't want me to sleep in the bed. They said he sees better from underneath. That night, I waited. I didn't sleep, just lay in bed with my heart pounding, listening. The whispers came, faint at first, then rising, frantic, desperate. He's coming. I heard a noise from Ethan's room, a long, slow creak. I bolted out of bed, my pulse hammering as I pushed his door open. Ethan was sitting up, his face pale in the dim light. He pointed to the floor. The boards were moving. I saw it, a bulge rising from beneath like something was pushing up from the other side. Then a sound, a deep, inhuman breath. I grabbed Ethan and ran. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove to a motel on the other side of town and didn't return to the house until sunrise. The floor was normal again, but something was wrong. The wood felt softer, like something had pushed against it from below. That was the last night we spent there. I packed our things, called the realtor, and put the house back on the market. I never told them why. I never looked back. And I never, ever let Ethan sit on the floor at night. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. And if you've ever had a chilling experience of your own, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your horror stories. Also, check out the videos appearing on your screen for more spine-tingling content. Stay safe and don't ignore the whispers in the dark.